They're really going whole hog with this dark Brandon astroturfed so-called meme, aren't they? Last night, I listened to U.S. President Joseph Bidenopoulos' speech, and I did not watch it the first time. I just listened to it, which is how I listen to most things. I am a classic... I'm one of those people who, in the 60s, I would have listened to the Nixon-Kennedy debate on the radio and thought Nixon won. I'm one of those people, because I never watch TV. Even when I have things that are video-based, it's on my phone, and I just put my phone in my pocket and I listen to it, or I set it on the table or something like that. And it was the same thing last night with Dark Brandon's fire and brimstone speech. And so it wasn't until this morning that I got to appreciate the visuals that accompanied this very dark vision that he has of America. And I have to say that the visual presentation added quite a bit of depth to his otherwise extremely thin and meandering narrative. And so, what was the core thesis of his speech? What was it that whole presentation was meant to convey, both through words and imagery? Well, I think it was supposed to convey a vision of a dark American winter. Not that he used the dark winter verbiage, which I guess he didn't want to recycle for a second year in a row, but that's really what the message was. I think this year would have been, based on the speech last night, this should have been his dark winter speech. I think he wasted that phrase last year because it seemed totally out of place. The dark winter stuff, it was like, what the hell was he talking about? He never really went anywhere with it. I guess he was trying to say last year that, we were all going to suffer from the Wu flu because we weren't getting jabbed enough. I think that was the point of dark winter last year. But this year, he's actually, putting forth a much darker vision. And that vision is of an America which is facing an existential crisis. An enemy within who has the potential to not only undermine, but completely destabilize and bring down all of our political institutions, as well as shred the very fabric of our American society. In Dark Brandon's view, you have the MAGA Americans. Yes, that was his term that he used. Juxtaposed against the real America. The MAGA Americans include Trump voters. So notice how the goalposts have shifted now. It was for going all the way back to 2015, or I guess really 2016. In 2015, the media was somewhat favorable to Trump because they thought that he would be a good person to run against in the general election. But definitely, by the 2016 election, Trump was thoroughly hated across the media spectrum, and we were told Trump is the problem. And then for 4 years while Trump was president, Trump is the issue. And then on January 6th, we were told Trump did this. And somewhere along the line, there were sprinkles of this idea that, well, no, Trump is not the issue, but Trumpism. And the Trumpism phrase didn't really stick well, so they kind of went back to let's just attack Trump. Now, they've moved on from attacking just Trump. They are affirmatively, and by they, I mean Biden's speechwriters. This is the U.S. administration. This is the executive branch, the highest elected office in the United States of America, is saying that the enemy that our country faces, the greatest threat to the United States, are Trump voters. Yes, the voters are a threat to our democracy. And why are they a threat? Well, we're told they're a threat because they are, in absolute terms, a minority of this country. Trump, I guess, only, has support amongst less than 50% of America, and according to the press secretary, as she discussed earlier this week, the administration's position is that if you hold a viewpoint which is supported by a minority of Americans, less than 50%, then that is by definition an extreme and fringe belief. And holding extreme fringe beliefs is in and of itself a threat to democracy. Now, don't think too hard about any of this stuff, because any one of these points, really, if you think about it too hard, doesn't make a lick of sense. But we can't focus too much on individual points. We have to focus on the big picture here, because that's what they're trying to convey. What they're trying to convey, Trump voters, Trump supporters, people who liked Trump's campaign and whatever ideas his campaign and his administration represented, those people are dangerous. They are the enemy. And so many in the media are calling this a wartime speech. If you look at the imagery, which I discussed at the beginning of this video, I didn't originally see it. Looking at it today, it's screenshots. It was very clear that, the stage design here, this was a television production. These were professionals trying to convey a very dark image. They had him make the speech at night, they had him do it outdoors, and they lit up this building with blood red lights. The president looked like he was broadcasting from hell. This was a dystopian vision that they were projecting onto American television. This was Independence Hall. This is a very old, classical architecture building lit up with red lights, lined with Marines standing behind the president, stone-faced, looking very intimidating in their uniforms. And, I don't know what else to think that they were trying to portray here, other than the image of the leader of a totalitarian state calling out enemies of the state. It has to be intentional. That you don't pick red lights by accident. You don't line up these Marines standing perfectly, behind the president, and and have them look stone-faced. They're standing still the whole time. You don't do that by accident. And I guess some folks at CNN maybe caught on to the fact that this just didn't look good. Oh, and especially did I mention there was a flag in the background. So you have the flag, you have the deep blood red lights. The color is very specific. And the soldiers and the president, speaking, and he's screaming a lot of it. Talking about how, the MAGA Republicans are the enemy. Now, he threw in some lip service of, I'm not the president of Red America or Blue America. I'm the president of all of America. He stole that line from Barack Obama, which when Obama made it was, incredibly, just dishonest and easy to blow off. But, even more so now at this stage of the game, 14 years later, probably after Obama made his, a similar speech with that line. But, you can't just throw that line in after saying that all of Trump's voters, which are, at the very least, 74 million people actually went out to vote for him, according to the official tally. Honestly, it's, even though they're not hiding the ball here, they're coming right out and saying it, it's still kind of hard to believe that they're being this open about it. Because, you've got kooks like me that say, hey, the government thinks you're the enemy. They think you're the problem. You're the carbon they want to reduce. I say things like that. The average person, deep down, they believe things like that. They know, hey, when you get stopped by a cop, that's not a friendly encounter. Kind of instinctively, people understand, hey, this guy, he's not my buddy. When you have to deal with the IRS, you don't think of them as, good people. You think of them as vultures who are trying to pick you apart. But there's always this very thin veneer that the federal government and all of government, but just mainly here we're talking about the federal government, they always maintain this thin veneer of, the military is here to protect us. Oh, the IRS, they're just loyal public servants. Oh, the politicians, they're just trying to serve the interests of their constituents. We all know that this is bullshit, but everybody says it. But here we have Dark Brandon coming right out and saying, you know what, no, screw that. If you voted for the other guy, you're dead to me. And we're hearing this from multiple Democrats now. We had the governor of New York tell people who voted, who support Lee Zeldin, her opponent, in the general election. Meaning the voters of, because you got to, generally speaking, you got two choices in any election in America. You've got the Republican or the Democrat. She's saying anyone who doesn't vote for me, pretty much, you don't belong in the state of New York. Get out, get on a bus, and go down to Florida where you belong. Okay, so that's New York. Then here in Florida, we have a former Republican governor turned independent turned Democrat gubernatorial candidate Charlie Crist say, hey, if you voted for Ron DeSantis last time, I don't even want your vote. I'm not even going to try and get your vote. Don't vote for me. Vote for him again. I don't want you. And then we have Dark Brandon here making a very similar appeal. And so there must have been some kind of central messaging that went out, because I don't know why all three of these, these are major Democratic leaders in one at the two of the biggest states in the country, and then the president of the United States. And they're all executives, by the way. And well, Charlie Crist is not actually a current executive. He's a former governor, and he wants to be the governor again. He's not going to be the governor again, partially because he's not even trying to flip votes. How do you defeat an incumbent without flipping his people who voted for him last time over to your side? That just, the math doesn't add up. But anyway, that aside, at the very least, Democrats now seem to have forsaken Republican voters. Officially. That's a big step for them to do it officially. Because again, like I said, everybody always says, oh, no, I of course want your vote. Even if we disagree, we're all American. No, that's gone. The other side, the voters who support the other side, are the enemy, plain and simple. And this was a wartime speech. This was a speech made to Democratic supporters, which was billed as an address to the nation, by the way. This was not a campaign speech. This was on the official White House YouTube channel. He had American soldiers standing behind him, which is significant. And he was talking to nearly half the country and saying, you folks are enemies of America. And if that's the case, that justifies doing all sorts of terrible things to political dissidents, just like they do in every other tin pot dystopian dictatorship. If you weren't already convinced of the reality of the criminalization of dissent in this country by the prosecution of Julian Assange, the prosecution in waiting of Edward Snowden, and of course, the icing on top, the prosecution of all the January 6th wanderers, well, then maybe you'll be convinced by this, because this also comes at a time when we see the ATF and the IRS ramping up their harassment of individual Americans, going after people who don't really have good access to legal counsel. Given the attitude of people in the government, do you think that these 87,000 new IRS agents, do you think that they're going to be focused on, the real Americans as described by Joseph Robinette Biden, Joe Bidenopoulos, Greece's favorite son, I believe is what Alexander Christoforou calls him? No, I think it's pretty clear that these resources, the IRS, the ATF, the Department of Justice, the FBI, these resources are going to be focused on rooting out enemies of the state. And I have to ask you, if that's the case, if we are going to be treated, and again, I'm just not a big Trump guy, but by their standards, I'm one of these crazy MAGA Americans, because I'm not a fan of the Bidenopoulos regime. Again, under Biden's definition, Jimmy Dore would be a MAGA American, one of these extreme people who, didn't support the war in Iraq, or who may have, off of YouTube, hypothetically, questioned something to do with the previous election. I have to be careful what I say on YouTube. People who maybe are not who are not totally down, as the kids would say, with the trans revolution or the green revolution. Whatever your transgression may be, you can all be lumped together as MAGA Americans who are essentially human trash. I guess this speech will probably be seen as a turning point, potentially, in American history. a point in which the direction of the future became clear and was totally explicit, where the divide, the split, the divorce of the great American family was not finalized, but set in motion. I think it's safe to say that Dark Brandon has served us with divorce papers. Now, oddly enough, the mainstream Democrat left is represented by MSNBC, which is, a DNC mouthpiece. That's about all it amounts to. They have been talking up quite a bit this idea of civil war, just like they were talking about the idea of Russiagate. Civil war is kind of the new Russiagate. And by that, I don't mean that it's like a ridiculous idea, but it's something that they like, that they're interested in. I think they like this idea that they could eradicate the so-called MAGA Americans from the earth and leave a pure country filled only with the real America. Democrats, left-leaning independents, as well as never Trump pro-war Republicans. Essentially George Bush, Dick Cheney, Bill Kristol, and a couple other lawyers. But the rest of the current American population, the people who live between the coasts, the people who live in certain neighborhoods along the coasts, they would be rounded up, put in supermax prisons, gulags, whatever you, deported maybe. And the places where they lived, in the middle of the country, that, typically the left, the coastal elites just kind of fly over. They can become national parks maybe. But either way, these people would disappear from the American public. They wouldn't exist anymore. And this is simply a fantasy. Trying to declare war on half the country is a losing proposition. But I'm not going to hate on Biden for doing it. It is somewhat productive because little by little, people are waking up. And something like this is going to shake a lot of people awake. They're going to look at it and they're going to go, wow, we really don't have a future as a unified country. And I came to that conclusion around, I guess it was during 2016. Not because of Trump necessarily, but just in general. The more I looked at things, I realized, this isn't going well. And there's no more off-ramps. People are, we're not going to come together. And so now we've just sort of been adrift for a few years, waiting for some real serious strain, a real serious crisis, which would ultimately shake the country to its core, and the cracks that formed long ago would split apart and become great fissures, which form new continents, cultural continents, that can then drift apart once and for all. And so Biden's speech last night feels like one of those tremors that is aggravating the cracks, that is causing the fissures to widen. And I'm okay with that in my position. I am in, I think, the best position I can be here in Florida. I remember back in the 2018 election, I didn't really know enough about either, or I should say I didn't trust enough about either Putnam or DeSantis to really tell you which one was better back in the 2018 primary. Because I didn't really trust either of them. I thought, once they get in, that's when their true colors will show through. And my only goal was that I hoped whoever won, whoever became the governor of Florida in the 2018 election, would be independent-minded when it comes to governing the state. In that I didn't want them to see themselves as a mid-level bureaucrat in a great American bureaucracy. I didn't want them to see themselves as a part of that broader system. I wanted them to be someone who was willing to forge to go their own course and really utilize their position as governor to the fullest. And I think that DeSantis has done that in spades. He has shown a willingness to interpose himself in between the citizenry and the federal government. And that's exactly what I wanted. So, considering he may run for president in 2024, I don't think that'll be the case. I hope that's not the case. He's, I think, a shoo-in to win the election this year. We've got 4 more years of him. I would be comfortable if things really accelerate over the next 4 years while he's still in office. I would feel comfortable that I will be somewhat protected. And I don't mean me personally, I mean our state. Because during the Wu flu insanity, we were one of the best protected states in the country. My life did not really change much. And so if the federal government wants to crack down on dissent and start outlawing political dissent in this country to the point to where they push us to a breaking point, I could easily see Florida under its current administration going its own way rather than going along with the crackdown. And I don't mean necessarily literal secession, but perhaps implied secession, a practical secession, meaning that, let's say the federal government just goes full totalitarian. You post something on Twitter that says, I disagree with something the president said last week, and they send the FBI to your house to arrest you and haul you off to a gulag. And the state of Florida says, you know what, no, you can't take our people away. That would be a form of practical secession. We could still have the American flag, but we would not be affected by the craziness in Washington. We would be actively resisting it. And so that's the only way that I really would keep from getting too worried myself about the President of the United States essentially setting the sights of the federal government on me, because that's what he means. He means people like me, and if you're listening to this, probably people like you, tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions. What's half the country? Like 120 million, something like that. Look at what happened. Not that I like Ben Shapiro, but Ben Shapiro, again, for all intents and purposes, these people the people who Joe Biden is speaking to lump me, Ben Shapiro, Jimmy Dore, and Alex Jones all into the same category. We're all the same people. That's what that's what this MAGA American catch-all is about. They're lumping us all together, and we're all the other. Ben Shapiro was at some boilerplate, silly little podcast convention, and I guess he went there and he took some pictures with attendees or something. And the venue, the event, had to apologize to the other attendees. They had to put out statements saying, "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry that Ben Shapiro showed up. We didn't know he would be coming. This is our fault. We should have kept him out. We should have had, the guards on the lookout for wandering Shapiros in case they walked into the convention center while our event was going on." And the takeaway from this story is that your presence, your mere existence, is intolerable. The mainstream American liberal, notice I didn't say far left or radical liberals or radical whatever stupid language the Republicans like to use to describe Democrats. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your mainstream liberal. They can't stand the fact that you exist. They want you and your family dead. And as long as that's true, national divorce is inevitable. And so this speech is another stepping stone towards America's breaking point. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.